Welcome to EDO Breakthrough, the podcast where we tackle economic development challenges head on. From small towns to bustling cities, every place has its own hurdles to overcome. The EDO Breakthrough podcast creates an environment of collaboration, innovation, and understanding where we can share our real-life challenges and brainstorm solutions. I'm your host, Sandy Dubé, a certified economic developer and founder of PPR Strategies. Each week, we'll be welcoming a different, brilliant, place-based mind to talk through real-life economic development challenges that have been shared with us by you, our gracious listeners. Welcome to the latest edition of the EDO Breakthrough podcast. I'm your host, Sandy Dubé. And I'm joined today with Nathan Ohle, President and CEO of IEDC, the International Economic Development Council. And if you have listened to any episode or in any of this economic development space, you know IEDC, but you may or may not have had the opportunity to connect with Nathan. And so I'm just thrilled to have you here kicking off our third season of the EDO Breakthrough podcast. Nathan, I'd love to hear a little bit about you. If you could introduce yourself to our listeners, I'd appreciate it.
Of course. First of all, Sandy, thank you for the opportunity to be with you. It's always great to be on any opportunity to be with you, but most importantly with your listeners. And so really just appreciate that opportunity. As Sandy said, I'm Nathan Ohle. I'm the President and CEO of IEDC. I've been here a little over 3 years now, but a long history in economic development. I started my economic development journey back in my home state of Michigan. I served at the Michigan Economic Development Corporation right in the heart of the recession, 2007, 2012. So any of you who served in that time, you know, it was both the worst and the best time to be in economic development. The worst, self-explanatory, jobs were being hemorrhaged, companies were closing, et cetera. But in my eyes, it was also the best time because it gave you an opportunity and quite frankly, it forced you to be innovative and to think differently about economic development. And in a state like Michigan, where you had everything from a large city like Detroit to the very smallest towns in the Upper Peninsula, you had to think about different ways to engage a whole host of communities to make sure that you had tools and resources that could help serve those communities and to ensure that you really had the people at the center of your approach to economic development. And it, quite frankly, had quite an impact on my own career path, but also why I love this work and the mission orientation of economic development. So I spent a little time at the federal level at the U.S. Economic Development Administration. Before this, I ran an organization called the Rural Community Assistance Partnership, where we worked exclusively in rural and tribal communities across the U.S. in a whole host of issues, including economic development and entrepreneurship, but also things like access to safe drinking water and sanitary wastewater, broadband access, disaster recovery, really focused on capacity building in the smallest places across the United States. And so all of those experiences have informed me and allowed me to be not only a part of IEDC, but obviously now helping to lead the organization.
That's awesome. I love there's a lot going on there, and I appreciate you sharing those details because yes, a lot of people probably did not know that you were there in Michigan and leading the way in that capacity, and to do it during that time period. Here we are recording this in April of 2025, and it's an opportunity to maybe test ourselves test us a little bit and how we do things and what it is that we're doing and how we can support our businesses and our residents, our taxpayers, all of these different stakeholders when there's a lot of change and uncertainty going on. How are you supporting members or supporting the economic development space during this time?
Yeah, well, everything that we do at IEDC is really in service to our members. Members are at the heart of all that we're doing, whether we're creating new programs, whether we're updating courses, certifications, or conference content. And so first and foremost, for us, it is about hearing what are the impacts to our members, whether it is around federal freezes, whether it's around tariffs and the impact on trade that we're seeing, not just here in the United States, but as an international organization to countries across the world. And so for us, it starts and ends with our members and what are they experiencing? What are the challenges and opportunities that they see? And then how can we help provide tools and resources to make sure that their jobs are as easy as possible? It is certainly a challenging environment. The uncertainty, I think, fundamentally is the most impactful piece, because it's really hard to plan when you don't have certainty around what's going to happen on trade or what's going to happen on a whole host of other new programs. But it also does provide us with a really unique opportunity to not only help get information out to our members so they're aware of what changes are happening and how that might impact their programs, their communities, et cetera. But also it gives us a chance, because we have 5,000 plus members, to have the voice of those members as we go back to members of Congress or to a new administration, to make sure that the voice of economic developers are at the table in those conversations. So as decisions are being made, they've got a go-to organization and obviously 5,000 plus members behind that organization to really know and understand what the impacts might be of new policy decisions, of changes that are happening, and to make sure that we can help tell the story of economic development and the profession of economic development.
Yeah, I think that's really important. We talk about economic developers are oftentimes kind of in a one person office, or they've got a full team. And I will say, I don't know if I've said this to you, but I always say, like, start local. So if you have to pick one, start with your state association. But talk to me about the difference between and kind of the inherent nuances and the power of state and the IEDC as an international organization. Where do you see some of those differences in supporting the industry?
Well, I don't see necessarily as differences, more of ways that we collaborate together. So we have deep partnerships with state associations, also provincial associations in the Canadian sense or in other regions across the country. And those partnerships are really key and important because, number one, those state associations intuitively understand what's happening in their communities across their state in a deeper way than we can as an international organization. And so they're absolutely critical and an important function in the larger economic development ecosystem. So we think of our state associations here in the United States and the provincial associations as true partners. We hope that every economic developer, if they have the resources, would be a part of both the state association and of IEDC, because we see value. We see that our services complement what state associations provide as well. And they are truly meant to be a resource to economic development professionals, to economic development organizations in those states, and obviously across the economic development profession. I will tell you, we spend maybe the most fundamental difference. We spend our policy and advocacy time focused mostly at the federal level here in the United States, and state associations, rightfully so, focus at the state level. And we, in partnership with those state associations, we host a bi-monthly call with all the state associations so they can share with one another what are they seeing in their states, what legislation is coming through, or what new policy changes are happening that either other states should be aware of or could take advantage of as a result of what's happening. Also, we partner with them on the basic economic development courses across every state. This is a great way for new economic developers or folks just into the industry to come in and to get a better understanding of what economic development is. And we do that in partnership with the state association. So they're hosting those in those states. We do that in partnership and make sure they've got the tools and resources from IDC's perspective that are helpful. And also, obviously, it helps in that larger economic development, professional development journey. And it often is an entry point into some of the courses that IEDC offers. So again, a complement, starting at the basic course at the state level and then entering into the courses that are more specific through IEDC, and eventually, hopefully, the certified economic developer, the entrepreneur development professional certification that we offer. So again, all of these things are in partnership with those state associations. We also partner with them when we're hosting a conference. So last year, we held the annual conference in Denver, Colorado. We partnered with the Economic Development Council of Colorado to make sure that their members not only could access both the conference that EDCC hosts, as well as IEDC's conference that was going to be in Denver. We know that resources are difficult for organizations of all sizes, but quite frankly, most impactfully for small organizations. So it's one-person shops, as you talked about, Sandy. And so we're always trying to find ways to leverage and collaborate with those state associations to make sure we're not truly competing with them, that we are complementing those services and providing opportunities for people to be a part of both.
I love that. And yes, I have been able to see and work with you and your team firsthand in that capacity. So I appreciate that. It's interesting. Oftentimes, the state, or an economic development director at a smaller local level may not need that federal advocacy. But when you do, you do. And so to have had that relationship and for IEDC to put out information on a regular basis. So I don't need to read every single article or every single bill that is looking at you guys are like a clearinghouse for me. And that information has been invaluable, like truly, truly priceless.
Well, thank you for saying that. That's exactly the intention. So I'm glad to hear that.
And then obviously, and our listeners do too. Unless you're just tuning in for the very first time, I have had the great pleasure of facilitating the Chesapeake Basic Economic Development course. As Nathan was referring to, this is a partnership with the state of Maryland, the Maryland Economic Development Association, or MEDA, which is a longtime client, and I'm a member of, and a huge just all things NITA, so all the time. And it's my favorite week of the whole year is facilitating that course. And um, I just have so many fun memories and stories of meeting people in person, and we still continue that course virtually. I think it's important from an accessibility perspective, and being able to break down some of those barriers. We've had a lot of people participate over, since the pandemic, since we went virtual with that course, the last week of July. So it's been a fun pleasure to do that.
Absolutely.
So talk to us a little bit about I'm going to kind of dive in on the strategic plan. IEDC, you came on board, as you said, 3 years ago. IEDC, it was time for a refresh of the strategic plan, and, hear from members. Let's maybe do things a little differently moving forward. Share with us a little bit about how that plan was developed and, some of the outcomes that generated from it.
Well, strategic planning is the most fundamental part and most important aspect for any organization looking to build out for the future and understand how the organization should be operating, what should it be focused on, and how is it engaging with its members or its stakeholders. So when I went through the search process, this was one of the biggest things that I talked about with the search committee. And so we launched this new strategic planning process about a year into my tenure here. And it was really, truly focused on engaging with our members, with stakeholders, with our partners. And so we had more than 900 individuals participate in this process, giving feedback through a whole host of opportunities, whether it was surveys, whether it was focus groups, one-on-one interviews, et cetera. And it allowed us to get a pretty comprehensive look at not only where the organization was and the deep level of engagement that we had, but also some areas that maybe we hadn't engaged in as deeply or that we had gaps to look at and think about. And so we launched the strategic plan at our annual conference in Dallas in the end of 2023 with three main strategic priorities. And again, in a strategic plan process, to me, it's really important to be clear and concise. Here are the things that we're going to focus on and give kind of a guide path to where the organization might head in the future. Those strategic priorities were pretty simple, but really powerful. The first is an impact on the individual and the organization. How do we help individual practitioners and economic development organizations drive impact in their communities through their organization? The second is an impact on the field itself and the profession. So an impact on the economic development profession. We want to lead and guide the future of economic development. We want to understand where the field is headed and how do we help serve the profession. And finally, an impact on the global community. And this was a very specific part of this plan because we are international. We engage internationally, and we want to make sure that we have a global perspective, that we don't get too mired into the day-to-day of what we're seeing right in front of us, but ensuring that there's a voice across the global community, that we can, advocate for policy, that we can drive storytelling in a really impactful way, and that we can engage people across the globe. As you talked about earlier, Sandy, finding ways to engage virtually versus in person. Because when you're thinking globally, you've got folks in Australia that are 17 hours ahead. And so how do you engage in the right way? How do you provide tools and resources that are going to help serve them, but also allow them to have a voice in what's happening at the organizational level? And so we launched that September of 2023. So we're about a year and a half into the plan. And we've already seen some pretty transformative change as a result. And again, all the changes that you're seeing and feeling at IEDC are part of that engagement, those 900 folks, and the continued feedback that we get through our members and stakeholders to make sure that as we're making changes, it aligns with what the needs are of practitioners on the ground.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think oftentimes practitioners, expect their professional association to like just be a mind reader and fix my problems without me asking for them and or explaining what my problem is and just intuitively knowing what they need. So, I'm curious, how would you like members or economic development professionals to engage with IEDC now that that stakeholder facilitation, strategic planning, now that we're implementing? What does that look like?
Well, there's two different pieces to this. One is feedback loops and how do they get us feedback on what we're doing well, but most importantly to me, what are we not doing well or what are we missing or not thinking about? So that's one, and we could talk about how they provide that feedback. The second is actually engaging with IEDC. There are a whole host of ways to get engaged. Sandy, you know this as an instructor. You talked about your role at the basic course, but also we have instructors from across the profession helping us with our courses and obviously the certification exams, et cetera. We do technical assistance visits a lot around disaster recovery, but also around a whole host of opportunities directly in communities. We have awards, since we have judges for those awards. We have graders for the exams. There's advisory councils and committees. There's community practice that we're generating. And obviously, then you have the board. All of those are opportunities for people to engage more deeply with IEDC. And I say this because what I hear routinely from our members that are engaged in those ways is they get so much more out of it than they feel like they're putting in. And a great example of that is technical assistance visits, or even folks that are helping with what we call our AEDO, or Accredited Economic Development Organization, where we have practitioners that have gone through that accreditation process that actually go out on site to organizations that are applying for and going through that AEDO process. And they're on the ground to help guide those folks, but they're also learning from those folks at the same time about what are they doing in their community? What has changed as a result of the pandemic, or what's changed in the current environment that they're seeing today? And so I encourage everyone, find a way to get engaged in whatever way makes sense. There's really easy, light touch ways, and there's obviously deeper engagements. But it's really important not only for us as an organization and as a profession that people are engaging in that deep way, because we learn a ton about what the needs are in communities and how IDC can play a broader and deeper role in engaging with those folks. But also, as individuals, also learn a ton through that engagement. The second piece that I talked about first actually is that feedback loop. And we want to create feedback loops in every way that we possibly can. One of the things I stress to my team every single day when I talk to them is we've got to find ways to get feedback from folks, whether that's a survey after a conference or whether it is engaging with folks that have gone through a course to understand, how effective were the instructors, how effective was the content, whether it is, getting feedback on the way that we're approaching federal policy, or what research topics would be really impactful for the field itself. Finding ways for us to get feedback, and most importantly to me, where are things not going as well as they should, or where are there gaps that we're not serving right now? Because those are the places that I want to spend most time to make sure that we're providing not only great customer service, but the right content, the right approaches, the right engagement opportunities for people, so that they feel like not only are they getting value out of the membership and the way that they're engaging, but most importantly, that they feel like they've got a voice in IEDC and a voice in where we're headed as an organization and as a profession.
I feel like I shouldn't say this publicly, but I will. Honestly, I'm going to thank you. You have always been very open, very present at any and all conferences that I've ever attended. You don't surround yourself with, a little bubble around your board or other people that I might feel intimidated to approach. And I really appreciate your approachability and being able to connect and say, hey, there's a problem down the hall. They're out of water. Or, hey, have we thought about talking about this other thing that's really important within the organization? And so I don't, if our listeners have been to an IEDC conference, they have experienced you and that accessibility and that openness and really that feedback loop. You really are looking for it, and put yourself in surroundings and in environments to accept that feedback. And I appreciate you for that.
Well, thank you for saying that, Sandy. It is really critical to me. To me, it is the number one part of my job, that, it is to hear what's happening and to understand where we can make changes that are going to help. And whether it's a small thing like the water in a room that's run out, or whether it's a big thing around a new course or topic, it's really critical for not just me, but my entire team to be not only willing to accept that feedback, but actively soliciting that feedback. And so whether it's at a conference in person, whether it is giving me a phone call or sending me an email, what anyone will find is if they email me, I will respond. It is really critical to me that we are engaging and finding ways to not only get the feedback, but act on that feedback wherever we can.
And for the last many years, I've also had the privilege of teaching you the marketing and attraction course with your team. And yes, the surveys are a big deal, and the surveys are reviewed, and we review them as instructors, and they are shared with us, and we review them and we go through them and figure out what we can be doing, and knowing that every class, the vibe is going to be a little bit different. Every things that happen outside of our control, things just happen, and we're all in, different moods here and there. But do I always learn so much from the class and conversation and creating environments for true discussion. And I think at your last leadership conference, the intention was to make it more conversational for the instructors, as opposed, so I was there presenting with a colleague from LinkedIn, which is a partner of IEDC's as well, and a tool that we all use. And it was great. But again, sharing of ideas, we, as speakers, were not there just to preach. We wanted to engage and create a dialogue to learn from people in the session as well. So it's that feedback loop is happening throughout.
Well, and you used the word engage there, Sandy, and to me, that's the most critical aspect of this. Whether we're at a conference, whether it's in a course, whether we're talking about awards, we want to make sure that experience is engaging, because that's where you learn the best and the most, and you get the most out of it.
Yeah. I want to go back to the technical assistance for a minute. And can you talk to me about how communities receive technical assistance? And yeah, how you get on the list. I've got problems. How do I get help?
Well, it's a great question, and I wanted to start by saying, the history behind our technical assistance is well before my time, and so we're just helping to continue the great work that's happened across the organization for a long time. This started, quite frankly, as part of Hurricane Katrina, on the disaster recovery side in particular, where IEDC spent a great deal of time, and a lot of our volunteers spent a great deal of time down in New Orleans, helping the communities that were impacted by Hurricane Katrina to think about the economic recovery aspects of the disaster. And again, the response is incredibly important. The immediate response, the life-saving aspects of any impact of a disaster are really critical. But oftentimes, that economic recovery aspect is either left behind or doesn't happen for quite a while. And so IEDC has had this really unique opportunity over 20 years now to help communities think about that long-term economic recovery phase of disaster recovery, quite frankly. And so we've spent 20 years in every type of disaster, whether it was a typhoon in CNMI or hurricanes in the Southeast or tornadoes or flooding in the Midwest. And each and every one of those experiences is different, but also provides really unique opportunities for our members to go to a place to help them think about the long-term economic recovery of that place. And we've taken those learnings, we've put them up on a website called restoreyoureconomy.org, so that others can learn from what has happened in disasters in the past, and start to build up resilience and mitigation strategies, so that if they have an impact in their community, that not only have they mitigated what might be the economic devastation of that, but also that they can then learn from that and actually have technical assistance volunteers come to their community to help them put together that economic recovery plan. We also do technical assistance visits on a whole host of other topics and issues. Usually it's because the community's reached out and said, hey, we need help with our strategic plan. And in some cases, we are able to pass that to other organizations that are really better equipped than we are. But in some cases, it's really in our wheelhouse. We do that around climate impacts and economic development. We've done that around equity in economic development. We also do technical assistance visits on very technical issues in economic development. And it usually is a direct result of a community reaching out to us and saying, hey, we need help with A, B, or C. And if we have a partner that is good for that, we make that recommendation and referral. If it's us that might be better equipped to do that, we are going to try and find a way to build that partnership. And it's done and led by our members, where we have volunteers from across not just the United States, but internationally, that can come spend time in the community, but also then stay engaged with that community virtually as they leave the community. So it's important to us to have them on the ground so they can get a real sense of what are the issues and challenges that community is facing, and obviously build relationships with the people on the ground, because that's maybe the most fundamental aspect of it. But it's not just coming and then, oh, we'll never talk to you again. It's staying engaged with a long-term commitment to that technical assistance to ensure that we help that community build out their plan, build the capacity of that place, then really implement that plan themselves.
That's awesome. I had the great privilege a couple of years ago to go to Puerto Rico and help with IEDC in one of your disaster recovery programs, and they hadn't recovered from one hurricane, and then others were hitting, and so we were able to go in, and I was down there for a week and went to Ponce and Caguas and talk with them about marketing and business retention. And, I always say that, business retention and supporting your existing businesses is the first step before business attraction. That has to be there at the core. But it was really interesting to look at some of the things from a resiliency perspective, and, the incubators that they were looking to create for their businesses with, redundant power, so that, when it's not if, but when the next storm hits, how are they going to be able to recover from that? So, really, if you have never participated and volunteered, a day or a week of your time, I would encourage you to raise your hand and, offer to do something like that. IEDC or within your states. It's an awesome opportunity to see and learn about how another community is doing economic development, and particularly how they have found themselves anew when diving through a challenge.
Totally agree.
Yeah, so interesting. And, I was also thinking, we talk about obviously being international, and so many of these things are super relationship oriented, and those relationships can be strengthened in person. But as I mentioned with, the Chesapeake Basic Economic Development courses online, you guys are doing a lot of online, webinars, and I had the a fun opportunity earlier this week of participating in a women in economic development new task force that you guys are doing. And, so there are lots of opportunities, even if you don't have a travel budget, to get involved and to reach out and to, get through all of your certification details virtually if you need to. How is that in terms of an intentional strategy of making some of these programs available and accessible?
Well, it goes back, Sandy, to our strategic plan. And one of the guiding principles under that strategic plan talks about accessibility, making sure that we can provide access to tools and resources to communities of all sizes and shapes in all parts of the world. And so that accessibility is really important to me. It's really important to us as an organization. It comes in the form of offering virtual courses where the possibilities for that. We are investing in a whole suite of technology upgrades over the course of the next year and a half. So eventually you're going to see on-demand training available, and new and unique ways to engage with the organization. It is also about ensuring that there's not a financial barrier to organizations that are struggling or that are smaller. So we launched a brand new membership. We redid our entire membership structure, quite frankly, over the last year, and launched it in January, where there are now reduced rates for folks from rural places, from the international participation. There's reduced rates for students and what we call emerging leaders, folks that are 5 years or less in the field. Number one, because we want to make sure that the barrier to them coming and being a part of IEDC is not a financial one, that they can come in and explore and understand the impact that they can have through IEDC, and make sure that they have access to our resources, to our tools. We've also opened up some of our research products to make sure that they are available to everyone and not always just behind a firewall for those that are paying extra to be a part of what we call our economic development research partners. We are trying to make sure that there's access to our conferences and content. So we've created scholarship opportunities for people to either get a reduced rate registration or even a fully covered registration cost. We are hosting the first ever Rural Economic Development Conference this June in Great Falls, Montana. And if you're interested in it, we have significantly reduced the registration rate, knowing, number one, that it's going to be a little more difficult to get to Great Falls, Montana than it would be, a major metropolitan area. But if we're doing rural, we need to be in a rural place. And number two, that a lot of the communities and organizations that are in rural places are smaller. They're either a one-person shop or their revenue sources are smaller than they might be in a larger place. And so, again, we want to make sure that there wasn't a barrier to people being able to come and explore and be part of the rural retreat. So it's a $300 registration for IEDC members, as opposed to what might be several $100s more for a typical conference. And so all of these things are being led by that strategic plan, and not only the guiding principles, but also obviously those three strategic priorities to make sure that we can drive accessibility for folks in different places across the world, coming from different situations and circumstances, and ensuring that their voice can be a part of the profession, a voice of the organization, and really engage in deep ways.
We do have an episode. We got to talk with Jolene about the Rural Summit.
Good.
So if you missed that episode, I encourage you to go back and check that out. But yes, we are looking forward to that session. I've never been to Great Falls, Montana, and I grew up in Great Falls, Virginia, so I've always wanted to go. Who knew you were fulfilling a lifelong dream of mine? So thank you. One of the things I think is interesting and is kind of popping into my head, and I don't have this question formulated completely, but for organizations that do have more than one team member, that are fortunate enough to have a team, what does it look like? How can we be encouraging or supporting, and maybe you already do, ways for multiple members of the team to attend a conference or to, get access to these things? So often, we think of the executive director or the CEO is the only one that can do. But what should somebody that's maybe younger, newer into the profession, how can and should they be getting involved?
There's a couple of different things. One, going back to that membership restructure, we also, as a result of knowing that there will be organizations that want and need to have multiple people engaged, and quite frankly, we love everyone across every economic development organization to be engaged. So we created not only those individual membership types, which I talked about with some reduced rates, but we also have group membership rates. And so you get a reduction in the per membership rate based on how many you have. So if you have a group of 3 or a group of 7 or a group of 10, you get, as you go up, you get further reductions in rates. We also do offer a group membership rate for conferences. So if you have a group of folks that you want to bring to the annual conference in Detroit this September, you can get a reduced rate on the registrations for that as a result of that. We also have scholarships available in limited amounts, obviously, but especially for students, for emerging professionals, there's really great opportunities for you to get engaged and do so in a way that is not financially prohibitive to your organization or to yourself if you're the one who ends up paying for those things. There's also, as you talked about, the virtual aspect of this. Each of our advisory committees is meeting virtually. They also meet in person at conferences, but we want to make sure that there's opportunities for people with specific interest areas or from specific, experience level. So we do have an emerging professionals group that meets on a monthly basis virtually, and they also then come together in person at our conferences, whether it's at the Leadership Summit in Washington, D.C., or whether it's in Detroit as part of the annual conference. And those are just great ways for you to get engaged with others in the field and the profession, to learn alongside others, to build relationships. I hear from so many of our members that they met someone in their very first IEDC course or the very first IEDC conference they went to, and 15, 20 years later, they are still deep friends with those folks, and they know who they can call in an emergency, or if they're confronting a specific issue, they know that there's people across the IEDC sphere that they can call and ask and be a sounding board to one another. There's also mentorship opportunities for emerging professionals and younger professionals in the field if they want to, really deeply engage with someone who's been in the field for a decade or more. So there's lots of different ways to engage. We're trying to create those opportunities for multiple team members of organizations to participate and not make it a financial burden for that organization to do so.
Awesome. That's great. I did not know that. I love to hear that. So shifting for a minute, going into your crystal ball, what do you see the future of economic development looking like?
Well, I think, quite frankly, the field itself is shifting or has been shifting at least for 5 years, if not longer. And I think it's certainly been accelerated by the pandemic. It's been accelerated by the economic situation that we're seeing in communities of all sizes. I think there's a couple of fundamental pieces. One, I think economic development is shifting from one that's primarily focused on competition. And again, competition is always going to be a part of economic development. But I think it's shifting from competition to collaboration. How can communities think about their collaboration among and beside one another, especially from a regional approach, a regional economic development approach? And those communities that are figuring out how can they collaborate and build together are finding really unique and new and innovative ways to approach this and seeing great results. So that's one. I think we are also shifting from a field focused on that business attraction. Again, always going to be a part of this and a focus on one industry or one company to a focus on small business growth at the heart of your economic development strategy, to really investing into your community, into the existing businesses to make sure they have the tools and resources to grow and thrive in your community because they're already there. They've already made the choice to be there. They already know the community. They're a fabric of the community. And so I think, there's always going to be that push and pull of attraction versus retention and expansion. But I do think there's a real sustained focus on investing from within and making sure that you understand how those existing businesses can grow and expand in your community. And finally, I do think, the field itself is changing from a demographic standpoint. We've got a silver tsunami of retirements coming up in the next decade. And so it's really important for us as an organization, for the field to start to think about how do we create those leadership opportunities for the next generation of leaders and even those behind them, those that are just starting into the profession. I think in many ways, it's been hard for people to see that growth pathway in the past. And I think we're starting to see people engage in a much deeper way to understand you've got to really start to help the next generation build up into these leadership roles and responsibilities to let them see those pathways and really to create career pathways. One of the first question I ask anyone in economic development is, how did you get into this work? And in most cases, it's a story like mine of stumbling into economic development. It's not like when you're 12 years old and you take that test in elementary school that says you should be a firefighter or a teacher or a lawyer. There's no economic developer in that list, right? And quite frankly, most people don't know what economic development is till you're in the field. And so I think we are also focusing on how do we create those career pathways? How do we help the general public understand what economic development is, the impact of it, the mission and service orientation of it, so that we do and can draw young people into this industry and give them and show them that career pathway all the way through their career journey.
Interesting. We talk about, the power of storytelling in economic development and in telling the story of our communities, but we seldom tell the story of our industry. And why is that? I often say, economic development is a community's best kept secret, and it shouldn't be. We should be out there, sharing these stories. And, as people are getting, laid off and, economic times are challenging and there's this up and down, is this consistency of an economic developer there to help many. It's, kind of one individual to help many different businesses and that impact that they have across a main street or across, a community or a region is exponential. So yes, it would be great if people could check the box. I want to be a teacher. I want to be a pilot. No, I want to be an economic developer. Wouldn't that be fun?
That's one of my big picture goals for the future, Cindy, for sure.
That would be awesome. Yes, I have shared, I think, little bits. I'll have to go back and see exactly what I've shared in terms of little bits. But yes, I did. I was one of those rare ones that started right out of college in economic development. But it's because I had a professor, my advisor in college, that people do what you're talking about. People do what you have just described. I was like, oh my God, who knew? No idea.
Exactly right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so figuring that out. And I also, I think we all reach a certain age, and I keep thinking about succession planning. And why is succession planning this like taboo thing to talk about? We can't talk about it because it means that I'm old. No, you can look at me and see that, I'm in my 50s, for goodness sakes, the low part of 50s, but I'm there. And so why, what can we be doing to, um, uh, help support the, leadership opportunities for that, younger or just new to the industry, and not feel threatened that they're going to, no, I hope somebody's going to take this, from me at some point and live on. So I'm curious if what you are doing, are you guys doing some of those, practicing what you preach at IEDC, in terms of that approach?
We're looking across our team to make sure that everyone from, someone just starting out their career all the way to the leadership team members see those growth opportunities and see those pathways within, not only within their own current position, but also obviously future positions. We've built out a leadership team at IDC in ways that the organization hasn't seen in quite a while. But we're also thinking through, essentially what I would call, and I think this is probably the case in many places, that missing middle, right? We've got a lot of folks at the very front of their careers and folks in leadership positions, but how do we build that middle leadership that's really critical to any organization? And we're thinking about that at an individual level, but also kind of collectively. How do that group of folks at that manager or director level position, how do they work together to build the leadership of the organization?
Yeah, I had an instance yesterday where, a team member, and this gets back, is kind of a little to your feedback loop, but also the idea of kind of driven by data. And I had a team member yesterday say, I think we should stop doing this thing. And I said, okay. Why do you think we should stop doing it? Well, our analytics aren't great with it. And, but she said, I know you're really passionate about it. I said, oh no, I'm not so passionate that, I mean, it served its purpose. And now if it's over, we move on. And she said, okay, great. And so I just, because we've always done something, or, I don't know, I really appreciated the, fresh perspective from a 24-year-old member of the team coming to me to say, hey, I've looked at this. I appreciate that we've been doing it this way for a few years. It's time to stop.
Well, it's often more important to think about the things that we shouldn't be doing than even the things that we should be doing that we're not yet doing. And so it's a really critical leadership aspect of understanding, there are people that are going to be in this work every day and in the weeds of it that are going to have really important opinions and recommendations. And you've got to be willing to solicit that feedback and act upon them when the opportunity arises.
I'm curious and kind of diving in on more of this international piece of things. And the world is a big place, and there's a lot of opportunity. Where do you see, or how do you see IEDC kind of positioning and aligning yourself, in the next 3 to 5 years across the globe, so that to diversify your presence a little bit?
Yeah, well, you can't be everything to everyone, and we know that firsthand. And so for us, this conversation starts with partnerships. Where can we build partnerships with either other economic development associations in different parts of the world, or other entities and organizations, so that, number one, we can come in and best understand what are the needs in that place. So, we have ideas and thoughts about what that looks like and needs to be, but without actually engaging the people on the ground, you're actually going to miss the mark. And so for us, it starts with building those relationships and partnerships. And I'll give you just a great example of that. I was in Australia last October, Australia, New Zealand, and not only meeting with our counterparts at Economic Development Australia and Economic Development New Zealand, but also meeting with stakeholders on the ground in those countries. Number one, to best understand how does economic development happen in those places, and what are they building out, and where can IEDC be a better partner? We don't want to come in and provide everything. We want to say, okay, if you need help with A, B, or C, like, we might be able to help you with A and B, but not C. And so it starts with those partnerships of really developing deep relationships. And to me, that's the most critical aspect of my job and of IDC's role is to build those relationships and partnerships and understand what are the needs in different places, what are the needs of those partners in different places, and how can we complement what they have or what they're trying to accomplish. And so for us, it's going to be a very intentional strategy. It is not going to be, oh, we're going to blanket the world and be everywhere. It's going to, okay, who do we need to be talking to in Central and South America? What relationships can we be building there? And then how can we be better partners to those places? The same thing in the EU or in Australia or New Zealand, Southeast Asia, wherever it happens to be across the world. But it's also recognition that we do have members in different places. And I'll say this explicitly. Our single biggest set of members outside of the United States is in Canada. And, in some cases we have really good, deep relationships. And in some cases we have not been stewards of those relationships in the ways that we should be. And so we're spending deep time listening and engaging with our Canadian members, but also others that are not members of IEDC. I'm going to be going later this summer and early fall to do two different listening tours through different parts of Canada, just to make sure that we're hearing and understanding where we can be better and deeper partners for those that are already engaged with us, and probably most importantly for those that haven't been engaged with us or are not as engaged as they used to be with us. And so it's just an example of us recognizing that we do have partners in different places already. We want to make sure we're good stewards of those partnerships today, build upon those, and then also find other opportunities to build partnerships in other regions of the world where we don't have strong partnerships.
Yeah, I agree. I've had experienced that Canadian engagement with some courses, and either in the basic course or in the marketing and attraction course, are almost always one, two, three people from Canada or Bermuda or Puerto Rico or Germany. I've had some students from Germany in these instances, and it is. I think it's an opportunity for us to listen to how they're doing it, but also be able to support and translate what it is, how to take a best practice here and apply it in their communities, if things are a little bit different.
Yeah, the way that I think about it is we have tools and resources, and in some cases, those can be easily replicated. But most importantly, we need to be able to create flexibility to allow those things to be tailored to the needs of those places. So, economic development is happening different in South America than it is here in the United States or Canada. So how can we use the tools and resources that we have and allow them to be tailored to those places and to the reality of how economic development is approached in those places?
Well, and I think in a very simple phase, we get there on a difference between urban and rural here.
Yeah,
And, Alaska to Florida, and what some of these differences are. So applying it, but you're right, it doesn't just happen like that. It takes some intentionality and some research and
that's exactly right.
a desire to
Yep.
do it. So cool. Uh, so I always ask my my guests, was there anything that I didn't ask that you were or that you didn't get to share that you were dying to share today?
Well, I guess what I'd love to ask you a question, Sandy, if you're okay with that.
Uh-oh.
And that is, why are you engaged with IEDC? Why has IEDC been important to you in your own career, your own pathway? That is my favorite question to ask people. So if you would indulge me for a minute, I'd love to hear your own perspective there.
Yeah, I would say there are so many different ways, but I am at my core. I am a supporter of professional development, and I believe that we should all invest in ourselves and advocate for that, investment. If it's an organization that needs to, fund, if I am fortunate now to be, to own my own business. And so I get to say when and where I get to go to things. But I want, my team to all know that they all have a professional development budget. They have all taken the basic course. Almost all of them have taken the marketing and attraction course. So I try to invest. So at my core, I am an advocate of, regardless of your industry, you should lean in and be constantly learning and supporting your own career growth and path. And so I'd say that's where it starts. And for me, IEDC has grown in so many different ways from that. One of my favorite things with IEDC was when the basic course was in person, and because of the proximity to your DC office and the Baltimore location for our basic course, IEDC would send 1 to 5 different team members to Baltimore to take the course. And I loved getting, and still do love getting to know the team that is doing the work within IEDC. You are here, and I love you for being here and talking with us. But you represent a large organization of really amazing colleagues, and I have enjoyed working with and getting to know people that have been there for a long time to people who are new to the IEDC staff and team very recently. The networking for me at IEDC conferences has been amazing. I've met and been able to maintain some beautiful friendships, people that I've met at my own trainings, that I went to OUEDI back in the late 90s. I see at IEDC, people that I only met virtually at the basic course online. We get together and take selfies and give hugs and stuff like that when we are in person at an IEDC conference. And so for all of those different things, it has, yeah, been an awesome support organization for me.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It's those stories, and again, go back to storytelling, are what make this work so special. To me, it is the opportunity for my team to grow, to engage with members, to be on the ground in communities. One of the things that we've done since I started is, we've opened up and allowed people to work virtually and have a hybrid work environment. Not every position, obviously. If you're doing policy and advocacy work, you probably need to be here in DC so that you get help. But in most cases, if you're on the professional development team or the membership team, if it works better for you to be in Iowa or Maine or Chicago, we want to make that happen. And so we have the ability for our team members to get out into community at a certain amount of times. Obviously, we have our team members come to conferences to engage with members. And for me, my favorite part of the job is being out in community, getting to see the work that's happening on the ground, getting to know and meet the people, and to really put a face to the name that I see in so many different ways. And one of the favorite things that I do in the job is I have just a random list of members. And if I have 10 minutes on a Tuesday or 15 minutes on a Friday, I will just make randomized phone calls to people and say, hey, I just want to spend a couple of minutes and understand, what's happening on the ground in your community. Where can we be most impactful or helpful? What are we missing? Because the feedback I get from those calls, those random calls at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, where people aren't expecting me to call, is where I get some of the best feedback. And so it's those moments, those small moments that you get with members, either directly in person at a conference or in community or on a quick phone call, that make all the difference in the world. And it's what makes this field special, because people will spend the time to give you that feedback if you ask for it. And they will spend the time to help you in your own career if you ask for it. And it is really what makes economic development special.
That's great. Oh my goodness. I love that approach. I love that you are leaning in on the phone and not hiding behind email. I love so much about that. That's great. Thank you for sharing. So, as we wrap up, and I know this has been a really long conversation, I hope people have stuck through it, and I'm sure they have. But the last question that I always ask our guests is, as the name dictates, EDO Breakthrough is the name of the podcast. And so I'm curious, what was your economic development breakthrough?
Ooh. I'll go back to the start of my career. I started working, my first job, I worked for Governor Jennifer Granholm in Michigan. And I ended up moving over to the MEDC because my wife and I got pregnant with our daughter. And at the time I was traveling with the governor every single day, and the schedule changes just wouldn't work for me to be home and get to spend time with my daughter. And so I got to come into the MEDC and work for some people that are still friends and mentors to this day. They are still people I call when I have questions. And I still have deep connections to those folks, whether they're still in the economic development field or whether they've retired out. And the experience that I had coming in as a fresh new economic development professional and being embraced by those people who had been doing it for 10 or 20 years. And when I asked questions, they didn't look at me like I was foolish. They legitimately responded and thoughtfully responded to my questions. And that had such an impact on me because it allowed me to say, okay, I do have a role and a place here. And regardless of whether I understand everything that we're doing, I want to understand. And people will take the time to make sure that I can understand. And that curiosity has led me to every single role that I have. But it's also been an important thing for me to help my team, especially younger people, understand the questions are important and they're not in any way meant to be a question of this isn't happening right. It's really to better understand. And so that curiosity and is kind of what I would call my breakthrough moment of the ability to ask questions and to get responses and for people to take the time to help you and as part of your own career journey.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I have enjoyed asking questions of you today. I have enjoyed listening to your perspective, and I can't wait. I hope that people are encouraged to maybe check out some of the details with IEDC if you have not been involved in the past. If you, there are lots of opportunities to get involved throughout the year. Please maximize your membership, your participation, and support this industry that we all love so much. With that, I will say thank you, Nathan. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Sandy. It's been a great conversation. Again, please let me know where we can be helpful. Reach out, come engage with us in any way that you can. It's a really special place and certainly a special profession.
Until next time, thanks, everybody.
The EDO Breakthrough podcast is brought to you by PPR Strategies. PPR Strategies, standing for People and Places Reimagined, is a strategic consulting firm working specifically with EDOs and other place-based organizations. We share the unique stories of communities through communication, strategic planning, marketing, media relations, and more. Visit us at pprstrategies.com and find our contact information in the show notes. I'd like to give a big thank you to you for listening. Remember, together we are unstoppable.